The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Meridian, the most expensive restaurant in downtown Seattle, while inside, billionaire tech mogul Ethan Ross sat slumped in his private booth, staring at his phone screen. The message was still there, glowing like a neon sign of his failures. Ethan, I can't do this anymore. The money, the lifestyle, the fake people, it's not me. I'm keeping the ring but not the promise. Don't contact me. Isabella. His hands shook as he set the phone down on the marble table. 6 months of planning the perfect proposal, a $2 million ring, a private island in Greece, all of it meant nothing. Isabella was gone, and she'd taken the last piece of his faith in love with her. Another whiskey, sir? His assistant Jake asked quietly. Make it a double, Ethan muttered, loosening his tie. The restaurant was empty except for his two closest friends, Blake and Cameron, who'd been watching him drink away his sorrows for the past hour. Blake, a real estate mogul with more money than sense, leaned forward. Look, man, forget Isabella. She never deserved you anyway. Easy for you to say, Ethan shot back. You've never had your heart ripped out and served on a silver platter. Cameron, the calmer of his two friends, adjusted his glasses. Maybe this is a sign, Ethan. Maybe you've been looking for love in all the wrong places. Wrong places? Ethan laughed bitterly. I've dated models, actresses, socialites, businesswomen, they all want the same thing. My bank account. The whiskey arrived and Ethan downed it in one gulp, feeling the burn slide down his throat. Outside, the storm was getting worse and he could see people running for cover under awnings and shop doorways. You know what your problem is? Blake said, signaling for another drink. You're too picky. You overthink everything. I'm not picky enough, Ethan countered. Every woman I meet comes with an agenda. That's because you meet them at charity galas and business dinners, Cameron pointed out. Maybe you need to find someone normal. Blake scoffed. Normal? Ethan Ross doesn't do normal. The man owns 3 companies, 2 jets, and a yacht bigger than most people's houses. Maybe that's the problem, Ethan said quietly, staring into his empty glass. Maybe I need to find someone who doesn't know any of that. Good luck with that, Blake laughed. Your face has been on every business magazine cover for the past 5 years. The conversation might have ended there, but the whiskey was making Ethan feel reckless. The pain in his chest from Isabella's rejection was mixing with years of disappointment, creating a dangerous cocktail of desperation and defiance. You want to know something? Ethan said suddenly, his voice getting louder. I'm done with this whole dating game. Done with background checks and prenups and wondering if someone loves me or my money. So what are you going to do? Become a monk? Blake joked. Ethan stood up abruptly, swaying slightly. The alcohol and heartbreak were making him feel bold in a way that would probably embarrass him tomorrow. No. I'm going to prove that real love still exists. How exactly do you plan to do that? Cameron asked, looking concerned. Ethan walked to the window, pressing his palm against the cold glass. Through the rain, he could see people hurrying past, their faces hidden under umbrellas and hoods. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, untouched by the complications of extreme wealth. I'm going to marry the first girl who walks through that door, he announced. Blake nearly choked on his drink. You're what? You heard me, Ethan said, turning back to face his friends. The very next woman who walks into this restaurant, I'm going to marry her. Ethan, you're drunk, Cameron said gently. You don't mean that. I'm not that drunk, Ethan insisted, though he had to grab the back of his chair for balance. And I absolutely mean it. If love is real, if there's such a thing as fate or destiny or whatever you want to call it, then it shouldn't matter how I meet someone. Blake was grinning now, sensing an opportunity for entertainment. This is insane. I love it. What if she's married? Then I'll wait, Ethan said firmly. What if she's not your type? Then I'll learn to make her my type. Cameron stood up, clearly worried. Ethan, listen to yourself. You can't just marry a random stranger. Why not? Ethan demanded. Arranged marriages worked for centuries. At least this way, I'll know she's not after my money, she won't even know who I am. And how exactly do you plan to hide the fact that you're worth $8 billion? Blake asked. Ethan thought for a moment, the wheels in his alcohol-soaked brain turning slowly. I'll pretend to be someone else. Just a regular guy. This is the stupidest idea you've ever had, Cameron said. Or the smartest, Ethan countered. Think about it. No expectations, no preconceptions, just 2 people getting to know each other. Blake was practically bouncing in his seat. I'm in. This is better than reality TV. You're not in anything, Cameron said firmly. This is Ethan's life we're talking about. Exactly, Ethan said. My life, my choice. And I choose to trust in something bigger than myself for once. Thunder crashed outside so loud it shook the windows. The storm was reaching its peak, and Ethan knew that anyone caught in this weather would be desperate for shelter. His restaurant stayed open late, and the warm glow from the windows would be like a beacon to anyone looking for refuge. So what are the rules? Blake asked, clearly treating this like a game. No rules, Ethan said. Just, when she walks in, I introduce myself, get to know her, and see what happens. And if nothing happens? Cameron asked. Then at least I'll have tried something different. Jake, who had been quietly cleaning glasses behind the bar, looked up nervously. Sir, should I prepare for this somehow? Just act normal, Ethan said. Actually, don't call me sir anymore. Just Ethan. This is happening, Blake said, rubbing his hands together. This is actually happening. Cameron shook his head but sat back down. Fine. But I'm staying to make sure you don't do anything completely insane. Too late for that, Blake laughed. Ethan straightened his tie and ran a hand through his dark hair. The whiskey was making everything feel surreal, like he was watching someone else's life unfold. But beneath the alcohol and the pain, there was something else, a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, he was about to change his life forever. Outside, the storm raged on, and inside Meridian, 3 men waited for destiny to walk through the door. The clock on the wall ticked past 11 p.m. Most restaurants would be closing soon, but Meridian stayed open until midnight for their exclusive clientele. Ethan found himself staring at that door, wondering what kind of woman would be out in weather like this. Last chance to back out, Cameron said quietly. Ethan shook his head. I meant what I said. The next woman through that door is going to be my wife. As if summoned by his words, the brass handle turned, and the door began to open. The door swung open with a gust of wind and rain, and Ethan's heart stopped. A young woman stumbled inside, soaked to the bone and shivering. Her curly black hair was plastered to her head, and her simple jeans and oversized sweater clung to her small frame. She stood in the doorway for a moment, looking around with wide, uncertain eyes. She was beautiful, not in the polished, artificial way of the women Ethan usually dated, but in a natural, unguarded way that took his breath away. Her dark skin glistened with raindrops, and when she tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear, he noticed her hands were stained with what looked like paint. Oh my God, Blake whispered. She's gorgeous. Cameron grabbed Ethan's arm. You don't have to do this. But Ethan was already standing, his legs moving before his brain could catch up. The alcohol had made him bold, but something about this woman made him feel steady for the first time all evening. Excuse me, he called out, his voice carrying across the nearly empty restaurant. The woman looked up, startled. Up close, he could see that she was younger than him, probably mid-20s, with intelligent brown eyes and full lips that were currently turning blue from the cold. I'm sorry, she said quickly, her voice soft but clear. I know this is a fancy place. I was just trying to get out of the rain. I can leave dash. No, Ethan said, reaching her before she could turn around. Please don't leave. Are you okay? She looked at him suspiciously, clearly not used to kindness from strangers. I'm fine. Just wet. You're freezing, he said, noticing how she was trying to hide her shivering. Let me get you something warm to drink. I can't afford dash. It's on the house, Ethan said quickly. I work here. The lie came so easily he almost believed it himself. Behind him, he heard Blake snort with laughter, but he ignored his friend. You work here? She asked, looking at his expensive suit. Manager, he said, improvising. Night shift. She studied his face for a long moment, and Ethan felt like she was seeing right through him. But finally she nodded. Okay, thank you. Just something hot. Tea maybe? Perfect. Why don't you sit down? He gestured to a table near the fireplace, away from his friends who were watching the whole thing like it was dinner theater. As she walked toward the table, Ethan caught a glimpse of a canvas bag slung over her shoulder. Through the wet fabric he could see the corner of what looked like a sketch pad. Jake, he called to his assistant, who was still behind the bar looking confused. Could you bring us some hot tea? And maybe a towel? Of course, sir, I mean Ethan, Jake stammered. The woman had taken a seat at the table, and she was looking around the restaurant with wide eyes. Ethan realized she was probably intimidating by the marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and original artwork on the walls. This place is incredible, she said when he joined her. I've walked past it 100 times, but I never imagined it was so beautiful inside. You live around here? Ethan asked, settling into the chair across from her. A few blocks away, she said, then quickly added, well, for now anyway. There was something sad in her voice that made Ethan want to ask more, but Jake arrived with the tea and a fluffy white towel. Thank you, she said gratefully, wrapping the towel around her shoulders. This is really kind of you. It's nothing, Ethan said, though he was already wondering how he was going to explain this to Jake later. I'm Ethan, by the way. Naya, she said, warming her hands on the teacup. That's a beautiful name. She smiled for the first time since entering the restaurant, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest. My grandmother chose it. She said it meant flowing water in some ancient language. It suits you, Ethan said, thinking of how she'd looked coming in from the storm. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment while Naya sipped her tea. Ethan found himself studying her face, the way her eyes crinkled slightly when she smiled, the small scar above her left eyebrow, the way she held her cup like it was precious. So what brings you out in a storm like this? He asked. Naya's expression clouded over. Work stuff. I had a meeting that ran late and then I missed the last bus. What kind of work do you do? She hesitated as if deciding whether to trust him. I'm an artist. Well, trying to be one anyway. That's amazing, Ethan said, and he meant it. What kind of art? Paintings mostly. Some sketches. She gestured to her bag. I always carry my sketch pad. You never know when inspiration will strike. Can I see? Naya looked surprised. You want to see my work? If you don't mind sharing. She studied his face again as if trying to figure out his angle. Most people, Ethan realized, probably asked about her art but didn't really care about the answer. Finally, she reached into her bag and pulled out a slightly damp sketch pad. These are just practice sketches, she said, flipping through pages. Nothing fancy. But Ethan was amazed by what he saw. Her drawings were full of life and emotion, street scenes with incredible detail, portraits that seemed to capture the very soul of her subjects, landscapes that made him want to visit places he'd never heard of. Naya, these are incredible, he said, and he wasn't just being polite. You're really talented. She blushed, closing the sketch pad quickly. You're just being nice. I'm not. I mean it. Have you ever shown these anywhere? A few coffee shops around town have let me hang some paintings, she said modestly. But nothing serious. The real galleries, they're not interested in artists like me. What do you mean, artists like you? She gave him a look that suggested he should know what she meant. Artists without connections. Without money for the right schools or the right networking events. Ethan felt a pang of guilt, thinking about all the gallery openings he'd attended simply because he could afford the ticket price. That doesn't seem fair. Life's not fair, Naya said with a shrug, but he could hear the pain behind her casual tone. But that doesn't mean you stop trying. Is that why you're moving? He asked, remembering her earlier comment about living nearby for now. Naya's face fell. My lease is up next month and my landlord is doubling the rent. I can't afford it on what I make from my part-time job. What's your part-time job? I work at a coffee shop downtown. 3 days a week. It's not much, but it pays for supplies and keeps me from starving. Ethan felt another wave of guilt thinking about the $1,000 bottle of whiskey he'd been drinking earlier. Where will you go? I don't know yet, she admitted. Maybe back home to my sister in Portland. She keeps telling me to give up on the art thing and get a real job. But you don't want to give up. No, she said firmly. This is all I've ever wanted to do. I know it sounds stupid. It doesn't sound stupid at all, Ethan interrupted. Following your passion takes courage. Naya looked at him with surprise. Most people think I'm crazy for trying to make a living as an artist. Then they don't understand what it means to love something so much you can't imagine doing anything else. Something in his voice made her lean forward slightly. You sound like you know what that feels like. Ethan paused, thinking about his companies, his innovations, the late nights spent building something from nothing. I do. In a different way maybe, but I do. What's your passion? She asked. For a moment Ethan forgot about his lie. He almost told her about his tech companies, about the satisfaction of solving complex problems and creating solutions that help people. But then he remembered he was supposed to be a restaurant manager. Problem solving, he said finally, which wasn't entirely a lie. I like figuring out how to make things work better. That's why you're good at managing a restaurant, she said with a smile. Something like that. They talked for another hour, and Ethan found himself more captivated with each passing minute. Naya was intelligent, funny, and passionate about life in a way that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with innovation in the first place. She told him about growing up in a small town in Oregon, about her grandmother who taught her to paint, about her dreams of having her own gallery someday. In return, he told her carefully edited versions of his own stories, his love of technology, his complicated relationship with his family, his recent heartbreak, though he left out the part about Isabella being a supermodel. "I should probably go," Naya said finally, noticing that the rain had stopped and most of the restaurant staff had left for the night. "You probably need to close up." "I don't mind staying," Ethan said quickly. "Unless you need to get home?" She hesitated. "Actually, I don't really want this evening to end. It's been nice talking to someone who actually listens." "Then let's not end it," Ethan said. "Are you hungry? I could make us something to eat." "You cook too? I'm full of surprises." She laughed and the sound was like music to his ears. "Okay, but nothing fancy. I feel out of place enough as it is." As Ethan headed to the kitchen to find something simple to prepare, he caught sight of Blake and Cameron, who had been uncharacteristically quiet for the past hour. They were both staring at him with expressions of amazement. "Well?" Blake whispered as Ethan passed their table. "Well, what?" Ethan whispered back. "Are you going to marry her?" Ethan looked back at Naya, who was sketching something in her pad while she waited. In the firelight, she looked like a painting herself, beautiful, serene, and completely unaware of the chaos she just walked into. "Ask me tomorrow," he said softly. 3 weeks had passed since that stormy night, and Ethan found himself living a double life he never could have imagined. Every morning at 7 a.m. he would park his Lamborghini 6 blocks away from Meridian and walk to the restaurant, where he would spend the day pretending to be a manager while actually running 3 companies via encrypted phone calls and carefully scheduled video conferences. Naya had become a regular at the restaurant, stopping by every few days for coffee and conversation. She always insisted on paying, though Ethan had instructed Jake to charge her half price and put the difference on his personal account. She had no idea that the manager she was slowly falling for was actually the owner of the building, the restaurant, and half the block. This morning was different though. Today was Saturday, and Naya had asked if he wanted to spend the day together outside of the restaurant. She'd suggested they visit the Pike Place Market, something Ethan hadn't done since he was a teenager. "You look nervous," Jake observed as Ethan adjusted his deliberately casual outfit for the 3rd time. He'd chosen jeans and a simple button-down shirt, nothing that would scream billionaire, but he was still worried about being recognized. "I'm not nervous," Ethan lied, checking his reflection in the restaurant's bathroom mirror. "I just want to make a good impression." "Sir, you've been making a good impression for 3 weeks. She clearly likes you." That was true. Their conversations had grown longer and more personal with each meeting. Naya had started bringing her sketch pad specifically to draw him while they talked, claiming he had interesting angles. She told him about her childhood, her fears about her future, and her dreams of painting something that would matter to people. In return, Ethan had shared carefully edited versions of his own life. He told her about losing his parents in a car accident when he was 25, true, about feeling lost and directionless afterward, also true, and about finding purpose in helping people solve their problems, true, though he'd left out the part about making billions doing it. The hardest part was hiding his world from her. When she mentioned struggling to pay for art supplies, every instinct told him to solve the problem immediately. When she worried about finding a new apartment, he wanted to buy her a house. When she talked about her dream of showing her work in a real gallery, he had to physically restrain himself from making a phone call that would make it happen overnight. But he was learning something valuable in the process. For the first time in years, someone liked him for who he was as a person, not what he could provide. Naya laughed at his jokes, listened to his stories, and seemed genuinely interested in his thoughts and opinions. She had no idea he could afford to buy her anything she wanted, and somehow that made every smile, every laugh, every moment of connection feel precious. His phone buzzed with a text from Blake. "How's the fake poor guy act going? Cameron thinks you've lost your mind, but I'm impressed you've kept it up this long." Ethan deleted the message without responding. His friends had been supportive in their own way, but they didn't understand what this meant to him. For the first time since building his first successful app, he felt like he was discovering who he really was underneath all the money and success. At exactly 10 a.m., Naya knocked on the restaurant's glass door. Ethan had been waiting for 15 minutes, too excited to focus on anything else. "Ready for your Pike Place adventure?" she asked with a grin as he let her in. She was wearing a yellow sundress that brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes, and her hair was pulled back in a way that showed off her graceful neck. She looked beautiful and happy, and Ethan felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. "I should warn you," he said as they walked toward the market, "I haven't done the tourist thing in Seattle for years." That's because you work too much, she said, bumping his shoulder playfully. When's the last time you took a real day off? Ethan thought about it. He'd taken vacations, of course, but they were usually working vacations, business trips disguised as getaways, or retreats where he ended up checking emails by the pool. I honestly can't remember, he admitted. That's sad, Naya said, but her tone was gentle rather than judgmental. Life is happening all around us. We have to stop and pay attention sometimes. As they walked through the market, Ethan began to see Seattle through Naya's eyes. She stopped at every flower stand to smell the bouquets, chatted with vendors about their produce, and sketched the fish-throwing performers while laughing at their jokes. She moved through the world with a curiosity and joy that was infectious. Try this, she said, offering him a sample of honey from a local beekeeper's stand. It's good, Ethan said, though he was more focused on watching her face light up as she tasted it. Good? It's amazing. This man has been keeping bees for 30 years. Do you know how much skill and patience that takes? Ethan found himself buying a jar of the honey, not because he particularly needed it, but because Naya's enthusiasm made him want to support the beekeeper's craft. They spent the morning wandering through the market, and Ethan was amazed by how much he was learning. Not just about honey and flowers and fish, but about Naya. She approached everything with genuine interest and respect, treating the teenage musician busking for change with the same attention she gave the master craftsman selling hand-carved wooden bowls. You're really good with people, he observed as they sat sharing a bag of mini donuts. What do you mean? You make everyone feel important. The way you talk to people, ask them about their work, it's like you really care. Naya looked surprised. Of course I care. Everyone has a story worth hearing. Not everyone thinks that way. Then they're missing out, she said simply. Some of my best paintings came from conversations with strangers. Like that man selling flowers. Did you see the way his hands moved when he talked about arranging bouquets? There's art in everything if you pay attention. They were walking past a small gallery tucked between a spice shop and a vintage clothing store when Naya stopped suddenly. What is it? Ethan asked. Nothing, just. She was staring at a painting in the window. I applied to show my work here 6 months ago. They never even responded to my email. Ethan looked at the painting she was studying. It was technically competent but lacked the emotion and life he'd seen in her sketches. Their loss, he said. Maybe. Or maybe I'm not ready yet. Can I see more of your work? Ethan asked impulsively. I mean more than just sketches. Your actual paintings. Naya hesitated. They're not very good. Let me be the judge of that. She studied his face for a long moment, then made a decision. Okay. But only because you've been so nice to me. My apartment is just a few blocks from here. As they walked toward her building, Ethan felt nervous in a way he hadn't experienced since high school. He was about to see where and how she lived, and he was worried about his reaction. He'd grown up with money, and even before his success, his family had been comfortable. He wasn't sure he knew how to hide his shock if her living situation was as difficult as she'd hinted. Her building was older but well-maintained, with a small community garden in front where someone had painted a colorful mural on the wall. Naya's apartment was on the 3rd floor, and as she unlocked the door, she turned to him with a nervous smile. It's not much, she said. But when Ethan stepped inside, he was immediately struck not by what the apartment lacked, but by what it contained. The space was small, probably less than 500 square feet, but every inch had been thoughtfully arranged. Plants filled the windows, books were stacked neatly on improvised shelves, and the walls were covered with her artwork. Naya, he breathed, turning slowly to take it all in. These are incredible. The paintings were even more impressive than her sketches. She'd captured Seattle in a way he'd never seen before. Not the touristy landmarks, but the real city. A grandmother waiting for the bus in the rain, her face full of patience and dignity. Children playing in a fountain, their joy almost leaping off the canvas. A homeless veteran sitting outside a coffee shop, portrayed with such humanity that Ethan felt his throat tighten. You really think they're good? Naya asked quietly. I think they're extraordinary, Ethan said, and he meant it. Naya, these belong in a real gallery. People need to see this work. I've tried, she said with a sad smile. But the art world is complicated. It's not just about talent. Ethan thought about the gallery owners he knew, the collectors who attended his charity events, the connections he could make with a single phone call. But he couldn't reveal any of that without explaining who he really was. Maybe I could help, he said carefully. I mean, I know some people in the restaurant business. Sometimes they display local artwork. That's sweet of you to offer, but I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. They stood close together in the small space, surrounded by her beautiful work, and Ethan felt something shift between them. The air seemed to crackle with possibility, and when Naya looked up at him, he saw something in her eyes that made his heart race. "Ethan," she said softly. "Yes. Thank you. For everything. For the tea that first night, for listening to me, for being you." He reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear and she didn't pull away. "Thank you for letting me into your world." They might have kissed then. Ethan could feel the pull between them, the way gravity seemed to be drawing them together. But his phone chose that moment to ring with the specific tone he'd assigned to emergencies from his companies. "I'm sorry," he said, stepping back reluctantly. "I have to take this." Naya nodded, though he could see disappointment in her eyes. "Of course." Ethan stepped into her tiny bathroom and answered the call. "This better be important," he said quietly. "Sir, we have a problem with the Henderson acquisition." His assistant's voice came through the phone. "They're threatening to pull out unless you're in the meeting Monday morning." "Can't Blake handle it?" "They specifically requested you." "Sir, this deal is worth $200 million. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his real life crashing back down on him. "Fine. Schedule it for 9 a.m. When he came back out, Naya was watering her plants by the window. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Just work stuff," he said, hating how easily the lies came now. "Listen, I should probably get back to the restaurant. Sunday prep, you know." "Of course," she said, but he could see that she was hurt by his sudden change in mood. As they walked back through the city, the easy conversation from earlier was replaced by a tension Ethan didn't know how to address. He wanted to tell her everything, who he was, what he felt for her, how he was falling in love with her more deeply every day. But he also knew that the moment he revealed the truth, everything would change. At the restaurant door, Naya turned to face him. "I had a wonderful time today," she said. "So did I." "Ethan?" she said as he reached for his keys. "Yeah. Sometimes I feel like there's something you're not telling me. Like you're holding back somehow." His heart hammered in his chest. "What do you mean?" "I don't know exactly. You just seem. I don't know how to describe it. Like you're used to a different kind of life than the one you're living now." Ethan forced himself to meet her eyes. "We all have things in our past we don't talk about right away." She nodded slowly. "I suppose that's true. I just hope that when you're ready you'll trust me enough to share them." As she walked away, Ethan stood outside his own restaurant, watching the woman he was falling in love with disappear around the corner. He pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long moment before typing a message to his assistant. "I need you to research art galleries in Seattle. Specifically, which ones are looking for new artists to showcase." If he couldn't tell Naya the truth yet, at least he could use his resources to help make her dreams come true. Even if she never knew he was the one behind it. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Meridian as Ethai arranged fresh flowers in a vase, something he'd never done before meeting Naya, but something that now felt important. She'd mentioned loving the way flowers made a space feel alive, and he found himself paying attention to details that had never mattered to him before. It had been 2 months since that stormy night, and their friendship had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Naya stopped by the restaurant 3 times a week, always during his lunch break, which he'd invented specifically to spend time with her, and they'd begun taking walks through different neighborhoods in Seattle. What surprised Ethan most was how easy it had become to live this double life. Not the logistics of it, those were increasingly complicated, but the emotional reality. When he was with Naya, he genuinely forgot about board meetings and stock prices and merger negotiations. She had a way of grounding him in the present moment that he'd never experienced before. "You're early today," Jake observed as Ethan finished arranging the flowers. "Naya's coming by at noon," Ethan said, checking his watch. "She wants to show me something." Jake smiled knowingly. Over the past 2 months, Ethan's assistant had become an unwitting accomplice in the charade. He'd learned to address Ethan casually when Naya was around, to treat him like any other employee, and to handle the increasingly complex scheduling required to keep Ethan's 2 worlds separate. "Any idea what she wants to show you?" Jake asked. "No, but she seemed excited about it." The truth was, everything about Naya excited him. The way she got animated when talking about a new painting technique she'd learned. The way she noticed details other people missed, the way light fell across a building, the expression on a stranger's face, the perfect imperfection of a flower wilting in a window box. She was teaching him to see the world differently, and he was falling deeper in love with her every day. His phone buzzed with a text from Cameron. "Board meeting moved to 2 p.m. today. Also, Blake wants to know if you're ever going to actually propose to this girl or if this is the world's most elaborate practical joke." Ethan quickly typed back, "Tell Blake to mind his own business. And I'll be there at 2. The restaurant door chimed, and Ethan looked up to see Naya practically bouncing with excitement. She was carrying a large portfolio case and wearing the biggest smile he'd seen on her face since they'd met. "Okay," she said without preamble, "you have to promise not to make fun of me." "I would never make fun of you," Ethan said, coming around the counter to greet her. "What's going on?" "I did something crazy," she said, setting her portfolio down carefully. "Remember how you said I should try to get my work in more places?" "Of course. Well, I took your advice. I spent the last week putting together a professional portfolio, and I've been visiting galleries and coffee shops and even some corporate offices, asking if they'd be interested in displaying my work." Ethan felt his heart skip. "And?" "3 places said yes," she said, her voice rising with excitement. "Not big places but real places where real people will see my paintings." "Naya, that's incredible," Ethan said, and he meant it. He was proud of her for taking the initiative, even as he felt a stab of guilt for not telling her about the calls he'd been making on her behalf. Over the past month, he'd quietly reached out to several gallery owners and business managers in his network, mentioning that he'd heard about a talented local artist who might be worth looking at. He'd been careful not to be too specific or pushy, but he'd planted seeds. Apparently, those seeds were starting to grow. "Want to see the portfolio?" she asked. "Absolutely." Naya opened the case and began pulling out photographs of her paintings, each one professionally shot and matted. Ethan was amazed by what he saw. She'd clearly spent considerable time and money putting this together, and the result was stunning. "These photos don't do the paintings justice," she said as she spread them across a table, "but they give people an idea of my style." "How did you afford professional photography?" Ethan asked, then immediately regretted the question when he saw her face fall slightly. "I've been saving up for months," she said quietly. "I've been eating a lot of peanut butter sandwiches, but it was worth it." Ethan felt another wave of guilt. While she'd been sacrificing meals to afford professional photos, he'd spent more on lunch yesterday than she probably spent on food in a week. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to pry. I'm impressed by your dedication." Her smile returned. "It's okay. I know it might seem silly to spend money I don't have on something that might not work out, but I realize that if I don't believe in my own work enough to invest in it, how can I expect anyone else to?" "That's not silly at all," Ethan said. "That's smart business." "Speaking of which," Naya said, pulling out a small notebook, "I was hoping you could help me with something. I've never sold my work professionally before, and I have no idea how to price things. You manage a business. Do you have any advice?" Ethan stared at the notebook, where she'd written down a list of her paintings with question marks next to each one. The prices she was considering were so low they were almost insulting to her talent. "Can I ask you something first?" he said carefully. "How much do you spend on materials for an average painting?" "Depends on the size, but usually around $50 to $70 for canvas, paints, brushes if I need new ones." "And how long does it take you to complete a painting?" "Again, depends on the size and complexity. Anywhere from 20 to 60 hours. Ethan did quick math in his head. Even at minimum wage, her time alone was worth more than she was planning to charge, never mind the cost of materials or the value of her artistic skill. "Naya," he said gently, "you're undervaluing your work." "What do you mean?" "Look at this painting," he said, pointing to a photograph of her portrait of the grandmother at the bus stop. "How long did this take you?" "About 40 hours. "And materials?" "Maybe $60. So you have $100 in hard costs, plus 40 hours of skilled labor. If you were paying someone else to do 40 hours of work that required this level of skill and training, what would you pay them?" Naya looked uncomfortable. "I see what you're getting at, but I'm not exactly in demand. I can't charge what established artists charge." "You're not charging what established artists charge," Ethan pointed out. "You're charging less than what it costs you to make the work. That's not sustainable. But if I price things too high, no one will buy them." Ethan thought about the art collection in his penthouse. Paintings he'd bought for hundreds of thousands of dollars from artists whose work didn't move him half as much as Naya's did. "What if we think about it differently?" he suggested. "What if instead of starting with the lowest price you think people might pay, you start with what the work is actually worth, and then find the people who recognize that value?" Naya was quiet for a long moment, studying her photographs. "You really think my work is worth more than I'm charging?" "I think your work is worth more than you know," Ethan said honestly. She looked up at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Why are you so supportive of me?" I mean, we've only known each other for 2 months and you've been nothing but encouraging about my art, my dreams, everything. Most people think I'm crazy for trying to make a living as an artist. Ethan felt his heart rate pick up. This was dangerous territory, the space between truth and the lies he'd been telling. Maybe because I see something in you that you don't see in yourself yet. What do you see? I see someone with incredible talent who's also brave enough to pursue something she loves, even when it's hard. I see someone who makes the world more beautiful just by paying attention to it. I see. He paused, realizing he was about to say too much. You see what? She asked softly. I see someone special, he finished. They looked at each other across the table covered with photographs of her art, and Ethan felt that familiar electricity in the air. But this time, instead of pulling back, Naya reached across the table and took his hand. Thank you, she said. For believing in me. For seeing something worth believing in. Her hand was warm and soft, with paint stains under her fingernails that she'd probably tried to scrub off. Ethan thought about his own hands, soft from a life of luxury, manicured by professionals, unmarked by real work. But when she touched him, none of that seemed to matter. Naya, he said, his voice coming out rougher than he'd intended. Yes. I need you to know that spending time with you has been the best part of my days. These past 2 months, they've changed something in me. They've changed something in me too, she said. What do you mean? I used to think that caring about someone was a luxury I couldn't afford. That I needed to focus all my energy on my art, on surviving, on building some kind of stable life before I could let anyone else matter to me. And now I think maybe caring about someone is what makes all the rest of it worthwhile. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket, probably Cameron reminding him about the board meeting, but he ignored it. Nothing in his other life seemed important compared to this moment. Naya, he said, I need to tell you something. What? But before he could figure out how to begin explaining who he really was, the restaurant door chimed and Blake walked in, looking around curiously. Ethan? Blake called out. Sorry to interrupt, but Cameron sent me to find you. We need to. He trailed off as he noticed Naya. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. Blake knew exactly who he was, and Blake had never been good at keeping secrets. I'm sorry, Blake said, looking between Ethan and Naya. I didn't realize you were with someone. It's okay, Naya said, starting to gather up her photographs. I should probably get going anyway. No, Ethan said quickly, but she was already packing up her portfolio. Really, it's fine. You have work stuff to deal with. She smiled, but Ethan could see the disappointment in her eyes. Thank you for the pricing advice. I'll think about what you said. As she headed for the door, she turned back. Will I see you later this week? Of course, Ethan said, though he could feel Blake's curious stare burning into his back. After Naya left, Blake whistled low. So that's her. The one who's got you pretending to be a restaurant manager. Blake dash. She's beautiful, Blake continued. And she clearly adores you. So when are you going to tell her the truth? It's complicated. No, it's not. You're in love with her, she's in love with you. Just tell her who you are. She's not in love with me, Ethan said, though his heart hoped otherwise. She likes who she thinks I am. And who do you think you are when you're with her? Ethan paused, considering the question. I think I'm the person I was always supposed to be. Blake studied his friend's face. Then maybe the question isn't whether she'll accept the real you. Maybe the question is whether you're ready to become the real you. As they walked toward the car that would take them to the board meeting, Ethan thought about Blake's words. For 2 months, he'd been living as two different people, the billionaire CEO and the restaurant manager who was falling in love with an artist. But increasingly, the second person felt more real than the first. The question was, what was he going to do about it? 3 months had passed since their first meeting, and Ethan was running out of ways to help Naya without revealing his identity. He'd managed to orchestrate introductions to several gallery owners through carefully worded suggestions to his network, but he wanted to do something bigger, something that would truly launch her career. That's how he found himself standing in an empty gallery space in Pioneer Square at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night, talking to the owner about hosting a solo exhibition for an emerging artist he'd discovered. The space is beautiful, Ethan said, looking around the white-walled room with its perfect lighting and polished concrete floors. How much for a month-long exhibition? For you, Mr. Ross, the gallery owner, Patricia Chen, smiled. Considering your generous donations to the arts community, I'd be happy to discuss a reduced rate. Ethan winced at hearing his real name. He'd been living as Ethan the restaurant manager, for so long that being addressed as a billionaire felt strange. Actually, I'd prefer if my involvement in this remained anonymous. The artist doesn't know I'm helping. Patricia raised an eyebrow. Mysterious. I like that. What's the story? No story, Ethan said quickly. I just believe in supporting talented artists, and this particular artist deserves recognition. And you're sure her work is gallery quality? Ethan pulled out his phone and showed Patricia the photos he'd secretly taken of Naya's paintings during his visits to her apartment. He'd felt guilty about it, but he needed a way to show gallery owners her work without explaining how he'd gotten access to it. Patricia's expression changed as she scrolled through the images. These are extraordinary. The emotional depth, the technical skill. Who is this artist? Her name is Naya Rivers. She's young, unknown, but incredibly talented. I can see that. Yes, I'd definitely be interested in showing her work. When were you thinking? As soon as possible. Next month if you can manage it. Patricia consulted her calendar. I have an opening in 6 weeks. But Mr. Ross, organizing a solo exhibition takes time. There's marketing, catalog preparation, opening night planning. Money is no object, Ethan said. Whatever it takes to do this right. And the artist? What does she know about this? Ethan hesitated. This was the part of his plan that made him most nervous. She doesn't know yet. I want it to be a surprise. That's unusual. Most artists want to be involved in planning their first major exhibition. Trust me, she'll be thrilled. This is her dream. After finalizing the details with Patricia, Ethan drove home to his penthouse, his mind racing with plans. He would need to figure out how to get Naya's paintings to the gallery without her knowing, how to handle the marketing and promotion, and most importantly, how to present this opportunity to her in a way that wouldn't make her suspicious. The next morning, he was waiting at Meridian when Naya arrived for their usual Wednesday coffee date. She looked tired, and there were paint stains on her clothes that suggested she'd been working late into the night. Rough night? He asked as she settled into their regular table. Good night, actually, she said with a smile. I finished 3 new paintings. I've been on this creative streak lately. I think it's because I'm finally starting to believe that someone out there might actually want to see my work. Of course they do. Your work is incredible. You have to say that you're my friend, she said, but she was smiling. Friend. The word hit Ethan harder than he'd expected. Over the past month, their relationship had deepened beyond casual friendship, but neither of them had acknowledged it directly. There had been moments, hands touching over coffee cups, long looks that lasted a beat too long, conversations that felt like they were dancing around something important, but they hadn't crossed that line. Speaking of your work, Ethan said, trying to sound casual, I was wondering if you'd be interested in letting me see your studio setup sometime. I mean, your apartment is great, but I'm curious about your process. Naya looked surprised. You want to see where I paint? If you don't mind. I find the creative process fascinating. It's just a corner of my living room, she said. Nothing fancy. I don't need fancy. I just want to understand how you create something so beautiful. That afternoon, Naya led him up to her apartment, chatting nervously about the mess and apologizing in advance for the smell of turpentine. But when Ethan saw her makeshift studio, he was struck by how perfectly it reflected who she was. She'd set up an easel near the large window, where natural light streamed in during the day. Her paints were organized on a small table with the precision of someone who couldn't afford to waste anything. Brushes were cleaned and sorted by size, and canvases were stacked neatly against one wall. This is where the magic happens, she said, gesturing around the small space. But Ethan was focused on the paintings. There were at least a dozen new pieces he'd never seen before, each one more impressive than the last. One in particular caught his attention, a painting of a man in a suit sitting alone in an upscale restaurant, looking lost and isolated despite the luxury surrounding him. Who is this? He asked, pointing to the painting. Naya blushed. Just someone I observed. I was walking past this expensive restaurant one night, and I saw this man sitting by himself. He looked so lonely despite being surrounded by all these beautiful things. It made me think about how success and happiness aren't the same thing. Ethan stared at the painting, recognizing something uncomfortably familiar in the figure's posture and expression. What do you think his story was? I don't know. Maybe he had everything he thought he wanted but realized it wasn't enough. Maybe he was waiting for something real to come into his life. And did it? Come into his life, I mean. Naya looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. I like to think so. I like to think that everyone gets a chance at genuine connection, if they're brave enough to recognize it when it appears. They stood close together in the small space, surrounded by her art, and Ethan felt that familiar pull between them. This time he didn't let his phone or his other life interrupt the moment. "Naya," he said softly. "Yes. I think you're the most remarkable person I've ever met." She stepped closer to him. "Ethan, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, simple and honest and terrifying. Ethan felt his heart race as he looked into her eyes and saw the vulnerability there, the courage it had taken for her to say what they'd both been feeling. "I'm falling in love with you too," he said. This time when he reached for her, she didn't pull away. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But when she kissed him back, her arms wrapping around his neck, Ethan felt something inside his chest unlock. They broke apart slowly, foreheads resting together. "I was so scared to say that," Naya whispered. "Why?" "Because I've never felt this way about anyone before. Because you matter to me so much it's terrifying." Ethan thought about all the lies he'd told her, all the ways he'd hidden his real life from her. She thought she was falling in love with a restaurant manager who lived a simple life. What would happen when she learned the truth? "Naya," he said, "there are things about me you don't know." "I know the important things," she said. "I know you're kind and thoughtful. I know you listen when I talk and you believe in my dreams. I know you make me want to be braver, to take bigger risks. What if those other things changed how you felt about me?" She studied his face. "Are you married?" "No." "Are you a criminal?" "No." "Do you care about me?" "More than I've ever cared about anyone." "Then I can't imagine what else would matter." Ethan wanted to tell her everything right then, about his companies, his wealth, the gallery exhibition he was planning for her. But looking at her face, seeing the trust and love in her eyes, he couldn't bear the thought of watching that expression change. "I care about you too," he said instead. "More than you know." They spent the rest of the afternoon in her apartment, talking and kissing and making plans for the weekend. When Ethan finally left, he felt like he was walking on air. She loved him. Despite all his fears and complications, Naya Rivers loved him. But as he drove home to his penthouse, reality came crashing back. His phone had been buzzing all afternoon with missed calls and messages from his office. There was a crisis with one of his acquisitions, a problem that required his immediate attention. By the time he dealt with the emergency, it was past midnight, and he was exhausted. As he stood in his marble bathroom looking at his reflection in the mirror, he wondered how much longer he could keep living two separate lives. In 6 weeks, Naya would walk into that gallery and see her paintings displayed in a professional exhibition for the first time. It would be the surprise of her life, the realization of her biggest dream. The question was, would she still love him when she realized who had made it possible? The eviction notice was taped to Naya's apartment door when she came home from her shift at the coffee shop. Ethan saw it before she did. He'd been waiting in the hallway with takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant, planning to surprise her with dinner. "What's that?" she asked, but her voice already carried the weight of someone who knew bad news when she saw it. She tore the notice off the door and read it quickly, her face falling with each line. 30 days, she said quietly. "I have 30 days to find a new place or pay double rent." Ethan felt his chest tighten. Double rent? Can they do that? Apparently they can. Naya unlocked her door with shaking hands. The building was sold to a development company. They want everyone out so they can renovate and charge higher rent. Inside her apartment, she sank onto her small couch, still holding the notice. Ethan sat beside her, wishing he could fix this with a phone call, knowing he couldn't without revealing everything. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I don't know." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I've been looking at apartments for weeks, but everything I can afford is either too far from the city or..." She gestured helplessly. "Or what?" "Or in neighborhoods where I don't feel safe walking alone at night." Ethan thought about his penthouse with its 3 empty bedrooms, his vacation house in the San Juan Islands sitting unused for months at a time. He could solve this problem in minutes, but Naya would never accept that kind of help from a restaurant manager. "What about staying with friends temporarily?" he suggested. "I don't really have friends like that," Naya admitted. "I mean, I have people I'm friendly with, but no one I'm close enough to ask for a place to stay." "Family?" "My sister in Portland, but she's made it clear she thinks I should give up on art and get what she calls a real job. Moving in with her would mean admitting defeat." They sat in silence for a moment, and Ethan could practically see her mind racing through options and finding each one inadequate. "How much would you need for a deposit on a new place?" he asked carefully. Naya looked at him with surprise. "Ethan, I can't ask you for money." "You're not asking. I'm offering. You work at a restaurant. You can't have that much saved up. If only she knew. Ethan made more in interest each day than most people made in a year. But restaurant manager Ethan wouldn't have access to that kind of money. I've been saving, he said. And I care about you. Let me help. I can't take your savings. Why not? Because what if something happens to you? What if you need that money for an emergency? Ethan almost laughed at the irony. The only emergency in his life was figuring out how to help the woman he loved without destroying the relationship he'd built on lies. Naya, please. Let me do this. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. You don't understand. It's not just the deposit. It's first month's rent, last month's rent, and moving costs. We're talking about thousands of dollars. How much exactly? She pulled out her phone and showed him her notes app, where she'd been tracking rental prices and requirements. The numbers made Ethan's heart sink, not because they were high, but because they represented such a huge burden for her. $5,000, she said. Just to move into a decent one-bedroom apartment. I have maybe $800 saved up. Ethan thought about the watch on his wrist, which had cost more than her entire moving budget. What if we figured out a way to make it work? Together? What do you mean? He wasn't sure what he meant. The words had come out before he'd thought them through. I mean, what if we moved in together? Naya stared at him. Are you serious? I think I am. And suddenly he was. The idea of waking up next to her every morning, of sharing meals and conversations and quiet moments, felt like something he wanted more than anything. We could find a two-bedroom place, split the costs. Ethan, we've been dating for 3 weeks. So normal people don't move in together after 3 weeks. Maybe we're not normal people. She was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. This is crazy. Crazy good or crazy bad? I don't know yet. She stood up and began pacing around her small living room. What if it doesn't work out? What if we drive each other crazy? What if What if it's the best decision we ever make? She stopped pacing and looked at him. You really want to do this? I want to do whatever keeps us together and keeps you in Seattle pursuing your dreams. But what about your place? Where do you live now? Ethan felt panic rise in his throat. He'd been so focused on helping her that he hadn't thought about the logistics of his own living situation. I'm staying with a friend temporarily, he said. His couch. It's not ideal. So you need a place too? I need a place with you. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them had expected to face so soon. But looking at Naya's face, seeing the hope warring with fear in her expression, Ethan knew he meant it. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. Let's do it. Let's find a place together. Ethan's phone chose that moment to ring with the tone he'd assigned to urgent business calls. He glanced at the screen and saw his CFO's name. I'm sorry, he said to Naya. I need to take this quickly. He stepped into her tiny bathroom and answered the call. This better be important, Marcus. Sir, we need you at the office. There's been a development with the Chin Industries acquisition that requires immediate attention. Can't it wait until tomorrow? Sir, this is a $40 billion deal. The lawyers are standing by. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the familiar pull between his two worlds. I'll be there in an hour. When he came out of the bathroom, Naya was sitting on her couch looking deflated. Work emergency? She asked. Something like that. I'm sorry I have to go. It's okay. I understand. But Ethan could see that she didn't understand, not really. How could she? From her perspective, he was choosing to leave her on one of the worst days she'd had in months to deal with restaurant business that couldn't possibly be so urgent it couldn't wait. We'll start looking at apartments this weekend, he said, kissing her forehead. I promise. Sure, she said, but her voice lacked the enthusiasm from earlier. As Ethan drove to his office building, he called Blake. I need your help, he said as soon as Blake answered. Let me guess. More complications in your double life. Naya's being evicted. We decided to move in together. Blake was quiet for a moment. You decided to what? It made sense in the moment. Ethan, you live in a penthouse that costs more per month than most people make in a year. How exactly are you planning to live with her? I'll figure it out. This is getting out of hand. You need to tell her the truth. I can't. Not yet. Why not? Ethan thought about the gallery exhibition now just 4 weeks away. He'd wanted to wait until after the opening to reveal his identity, to give her that moment of triumph without the complication of learning about his deception. I have something planned, he said. A surprise for her. After that, I'll tell her everything. What kind of surprise? The kind that will either make her forgive me for lying or make her never want to see me again. Ethan dash. I have to go. I'm walking into a meeting. The next few days passed in a blur of apartment hunting and increasingly complicated logistics. Ethan found himself viewing rental properties that cost less than what he typically spent on dinner, trying to act enthusiastic about places with thin walls and outdated appliances. But watching Naya's face light up when she found an apartment with good natural light for painting made all the complications worthwhile. She'd found a 2-bedroom place in Capitol Hill, not perfect, but affordable and in a neighborhood where she felt comfortable walking alone at night. The second bedroom would be perfect for a studio, she said, measuring the space with her hands. And look at these windows. It's perfect, Ethan agreed, though he was secretly calculating how quickly he could have the place renovated to make it more comfortable for her. We can afford this, she said, looking at the rental application with excitement. Split between us, it's actually reasonable. That night, they celebrated with cheap wine and takeout pizza in her current apartment, surrounded by moving boxes and planning their future together. Naya fell asleep curled against his side on her small couch, and Ethan lay awake thinking about what he was getting himself into. In 3 weeks, she would walk into the gallery and see her work displayed professionally for the first time. She would realize that someone with serious money and connections had orchestrated the exhibition. The question was, would she figure out it was him before he found the courage to tell her? His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia at the gallery. Marketing materials are ready for approval. When do you want to tell the artist about the exhibition? Ethan looked down at Naya sleeping peacefully in his arms and typed back, soon. Very soon. But as he held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, he wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his life. Ethan stood outside the Meridian Gallery, watching through the window as Patricia and her team made final adjustments to Naya's exhibition. The walls were lined with her paintings, each one professionally lit and accompanied by elegant placards with her name and the title of the work. It was exactly what he'd envisioned, a proper showcase for her incredible talent. In 2 hours, the opening reception would begin. In 2 hours, Naya would walk through those doors and see her dreams made real. And in 2 hours, Ethan would have to find a way to explain how a restaurant manager had orchestrated one of the most impressive art exhibitions Seattle had seen all year. His phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Sir, should I prepare the restaurant for tonight? Will you be bringing Ms. Rivers by after the gallery opening? Ethan typed back, not sure. Depends on how tonight goes. That was an understatement. Depending on how Naya reacted to the surprise, tonight would either be the beginning of their real relationship or the end of everything they'd built together. Ethan? He turned to see Cameron approaching, looking concerned. What are you doing here? I wanted to see the gallery before tonight, Ethan said. Make sure everything looks perfect. Cameron peered through the window at the exhibition. It's impressive. She's really talented. She is. And she still doesn't know you're behind this? She thinks some anonymous benefactor discovered her work and decided to give her a chance. Which is technically true, Cameron pointed out. Technically. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the gallery staff make final preparations. Are you going to tell her tonight? Cameron asked. I have to. After she sees this, she's going to have questions I can't answer without revealing who I really am. And you're prepared for her reaction? Ethan thought about all the possible ways this could go wrong. Naya could feel manipulated, lied to, patronized. She could see his orchestration of the exhibition not as a gift, but as proof that she hadn't earned her success on her own merit. No, he admitted. I'm not prepared at all. Meanwhile, across town, Naya was standing in front of her bedroom mirror, trying to decide between 2 dresses she'd found at a thrift store. The invitation to her own exhibition opening had arrived 3 days ago, delivered by messenger to her coffee shop job. She still couldn't quite believe it was real. Ms. Rivers, the invitation had read, you are cordially invited to the opening reception of your solo exhibition, Seeing Seattle, The Art of Naya Rivers, at the Meridian Gallery. She'd read it 5 times before the words sank in. Someone she still didn't know who had seen her work and thought it worthy of a professional exhibition. The gallery coordinator, Patricia, had been kind but mysterious when Naya called with questions. An anonymous benefactor saw your work and was impressed, Patricia had explained. They wanted to give you this opportunity. But how did they see my work? I mean, where? I'm not at liberty to say. The benefactor prefers to remain anonymous for now. Naya had wanted to ask more questions, but the opportunity was too incredible to question too deeply. Someone believed in her work enough to invest in a professional exhibition. That was all that mattered. Now, standing in front of her mirror, she felt a mixture of excitement and terror. Tonight, real art critics and collectors would see her work. Tonight, her dreams would either come true or be crushed in the most public way possible. She chose the navy blue dress, simple but elegant, something that wouldn't distract from her art. As she applied the small amount of makeup she owned, her phone rang. "How are you feeling?" Ethan's voice was warm and familiar, immediately calming her nerves. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if no one likes the paintings? What if this mysterious benefactor made a mistake?" "That's impossible," Ethan said firmly. "Your work is incredible, and tonight everyone else is going to see what I've known all along." "I wish you could be there with me," she said. "I know you have to work, but I'm going to be so nervous." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Actually, I was thinking I might be able to stop by after the restaurant closes." "Really? You do that?" "Of course. This is the most important night of your life so far. I want to be there." After they hung up, Naya felt calmer. Whatever happened tonight, Ethan would be there to support her. Over the past month of living together, he'd become her anchor, the person who believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. Their new apartment was small but perfect for them. Ethan had insisted on paying a larger share of the rent since he made more money at the restaurant, and he'd somehow managed to afford small improvements that made the space more comfortable. Better lighting for her studio corner, a decent coffee maker, even some plants for the windows. Sometimes she wondered how a restaurant manager could afford to be so generous, but when she'd asked, he'd explained that he'd been saving money for years and was happy to spend it on making their life together better. It was sweet, even if it sometimes made her feel guilty about how little she contributed financially. At 7 p.m., Naya stood outside the Meridian Gallery, clutching her small purse and trying to work up the courage to go inside. Through the windows, she could see people already gathering, wine glasses in hand, looking sophisticated and intimidating. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "This is your dream." She pushed open the door and stepped inside, immediately overwhelmed by what she saw. Her paintings, hung on the pristine white walls like they belonged there. Professional lighting made the colors rich and vibrant, and elegant placards beside each piece made them look important, worthy of attention. "Naya." Patricia appeared beside her with a warm smile. "You look beautiful. Are you ready to meet your admirers?" "My admirers?" "Oh yes, there's already quite a buzz about your work. Several people have inquired about purchasing pieces." Naya felt lightheaded. "People want to buy my paintings?" "Absolutely. Your benefactor was right to believe in your talent." For the next hour, Naya moved through the gallery in a daze. People, real art lovers and collectors, stopped her to discuss her work, to ask about her inspiration and technique. A food critic from the Seattle Times wanted to interview her. A gallery owner from Portland expressed interest in showing her work. It was everything she dreamed of and more. "Excuse me, are you the artist?" Naya turned to see an elegant older woman studying her painting of the lonely man in the restaurant. "Yes, I'm Naya Rivers." "This piece is extraordinary," the woman said. "The emotion you've captured. It's like you can see right into this man's soul. He looks so isolated despite all the luxury around him." "Thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to convey." "Has it sold yet?" I'm not sure," Naya admitted. She hadn't even thought about the business side of the evening. Patricia appeared at her elbow. "Actually, that piece has already been purchased." The buyer requested anonymity but paid full asking price. As the evening progressed, Naya learned that several of her paintings had sold, including some of her favorites. The prices Patricia quoted made her head spin, more money than she'd made in the past 6 months combined. "I don't understand," she said to Patricia during a quiet moment. "Who is buying these? And who organized all this?" "I told you your benefactor prefers anonymity. But I can tell you that this person clearly has excellent taste and significant resources. This exhibition is beautifully curated and professionally marketed. Someone invested considerable time and money in your success." Naya looked around the gallery trying to process what was happening. 6 months ago, she'd been struggling to afford art supplies. Tonight, she was the featured artist at a prestigious gallery opening, with people lining up to buy her work. It felt surreal, like someone else's life. At 9 p.m., she was talking to a collector about her painting techniques when she saw a familiar figure enter the gallery. Ethan stood in the doorway, looking handsome in a dark suit she'd never seen before, scanning the room until his eyes found hers. "Excuse me," she said to the collector, making her way across the room to him. You made it, she said, throwing her arms around him. I wouldn't miss this, he said, holding her close. How's it going? It's incredible. People are buying my paintings, Ethan. Actual money for my art. That's amazing. I'm so proud of you. Something in his voice made her pull back and look at his face. He seemed nervous, which was unusual for him. Are you okay? You look, I don't know, tense. I'm fine. Just tired from work. But as they walked through the gallery together, Naya noticed that Ethan seemed familiar with the space. He moved through it like he'd been there before, and when Patricia approached them, there was something in her expression that confused Naya. Ethan, Patricia said with a smile that seemed to carry hidden meaning. I'm so glad you could make it. You two know each other? Naya asked. We've met, Ethan said quickly. Patricia, could I speak with you privately for a moment? Of course. As they stepped away, Naya watched their interaction with growing confusion. There was something about their body language, the way they spoke in low, urgent tones, that suggested a familiarity Patricia hadn't mentioned. When Ethan returned to her side, she decided to ask directly. How do you know Patricia? I don't really. We just met tonight. But she knew your name. And you asked to speak with her privately. Ethan was quiet for a moment, and Naya could see him struggling with something. Ethan, what's going on? Before he could answer, a young man in an expensive suit approached them. Excuse me, Mr. Ross? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to thank you again for this opportunity. The exhibition is exactly what we discussed. Naya felt the blood drain from her face. Mr. Ross. The man looked confused. I'm sorry, I thought, aren't you Ethan Ross? There's been a mistake, Ethan said quickly, but his voice lacked conviction. Naya stared at him, pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed suddenly clicking into place. The expensive clothes he sometimes wore, the way he always seemed to have money for things, his familiarity with the gallery, the mysterious benefactor who'd organized her exhibition. Oh my God, she whispered. It was you. Naya Dash. You're the anonymous benefactor. You organized all this. The gallery had gone quiet around them, other guests sensing drama unfolding. Can we talk about this somewhere private? Ethan asked. No, Naya said, her voice rising. We can talk about it right here. How long have you been lying to me? I haven't been lying, Dash. You're not a restaurant manager, are you? You're Ethan Ross. I've seen that name, you're some kind of businessman. Naya, please let me explain. But she was already backing away from him, everything she thought she knew about their relationship crumbling around her. The man she'd fallen in love with, the man she'd moved in with, the man she'd trusted with her heart and her dreams, he'd been lying to her about everything. How could you do this to me? She asked, tears starting to flow. How could you make me think I'd earned this? You did earn this. Your talent, Dash. My talent had nothing to do with it, she said, her voice echoing through the gallery. This whole thing is fake. It's just you playing with my life like I'm some kind of charity case. That's not what this is. Then what is it? What am I to you? Some kind of project? A way to feel good about yourself. Ethan looked stricken. You're the woman I love. You don't love me, Naya said, wiping tears from her cheeks. You love the idea of me. The poor little artist you could rescue and mold into your perfect girlfriend. That's not true. Isn't it? She gestured around the gallery. This whole thing, our entire relationship, it's all built on lies. She turned and walked toward the exit, ignoring Ethan calling her name. At the door, she paused and looked back at the gallery full of her paintings, at the life-changing opportunity that now felt tainted and false. Naya, wait, Ethan caught up with her on the sidewalk. Please let me explain. Explain what? How you've been pretending to be someone else for 4 months. How you manipulated me into falling in love with you. I never manipulated you. My feelings for you are real. But everything else is fake, she said. Your job, your apartment, your whole life story, all lies. I wanted to tell you the truth, Dash. When? After you'd gotten tired of playing house with the struggling artist? Never. I was going to tell you tonight after the exhibition. I wanted you to have this moment first. Naya laughed bitterly. This moment? You mean the moment where I find out my biggest success is just my boyfriend playing puppet master behind the scenes? Your success is real. Your talent is real. The only thing that's not real is my job title. Don't you understand? Naya said, fresh tears streaming down her face. It doesn't matter how talented I am if the only reason people are seeing my work is because my rich boyfriend bought me an exhibition. I'll never know if I could have made it on my own. You would have. You will. Maybe. But now I'll never get that chance. Every opportunity that comes my way, I'll wonder if it's because of my talent or because of my connection to you. Ethan reached for her, but she stepped back. I need time to think, she said. I need space. Naya, please don't do this. Don't let my mistakes destroy what we have. What do we have? She asked sadly. I fell in love with someone who doesn't exist. And you fell in love with someone you thought needed saving. That's not true. Isn't it? Would you have even noticed me if I wasn't some struggling artist you could help? Ethan wanted to argue, but looking at her face, he realized that nothing he said would convince her. The trust between them was broken, and he had no one to blame but himself. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For everything. Naya nodded, tears still flowing. So am I. She walked away into the Seattle night, leaving Ethan standing alone outside the gallery that showcased her incredible talent. Through the windows he could see people still admiring her work, still talking about the promising young artist who'd created such moving, honest art. If only he'd been as honest as her paintings. Naya didn't go home that night. She couldn't face the apartment she shared with Ethan, couldn't bear to see his things mixed with hers, reminders of the life they'd built on a foundation of lies. Instead, she walked the Seattle streets until her feet ached, then caught a late bus to the airport, where she sat in the fluorescent-lit terminal until morning, calling her sister. I need to come stay with you for a while, she said when Rebecca answered, her voice hoarse from crying. Naya? It's 6 a.m. What's wrong? Everything. I'll explain when I get there. Can you pick me up at PDX this afternoon? Of course, but I have to go. I'll text you my flight information. She used her credit card to book a one-way ticket to Portland, knowing she'd worry about the money later. Right now, she just needed to get away from Seattle, away from the gallery where her dreams had come true and been destroyed in the same night, away from Ethan and his complicated, expensive world. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his penthouse, staring at his phone and fighting the urge to call her. He'd driven by their apartment twice, but her car wasn't there and she wasn't answering his calls or texts. Blake and Cameron had found him at the gallery after Naya left, and they'd helped him deal with the remaining guests and the awkward questions about the evening's dramatic conclusion. You should have told her weeks ago, Cameron said, not for the first time. I know that now, Ethan snapped, then immediately regretted his tone. I'm sorry. I know you're trying to help. What are you going to do? Blake asked. I don't know. Give her space, I guess. Hope she'll let me explain. And if she doesn't? Ethan thought about a life without Naya in it, about going back to his empty penthouse and his loveless existence, and felt sick to his stomach. Then I'll have gotten exactly what I deserve. Patricia called him that afternoon with an update on the exhibition. 3 more paintings sold this morning, she reported. And I've had inquiries from 2 other galleries about showing her work. That's great, Ethan said, though he felt no joy in Naya's success now that she thought it was tainted. Is she all right? Patricia asked carefully. After last night, She seemed upset. She found out I was behind the exhibition. I was wondering when you'd tell her. She figured it out herself. And she didn't take it well. I imagine not. Anonymous benefactors are romantic in theory, but when the anonymity disappears. Patricia paused. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Her work deserves to be seen. She doesn't see it that way. Give her time. When the shock wears off, she'll realize that no amount of money or connections could have created the response her work received last night. People were genuinely moved by her art. But Ethan wasn't sure time would be enough. He'd seen the look in Naya's eyes, not just anger, but a deep sense of betrayal that cut to the core of who she was as an artist and as a person. In Portland, Naya sat in her sister's pristine kitchen, mechanically eating the sandwich Rebecca had made for her while explaining the whole story. So let me get this straight, Rebecca said when Naya finished. This guy who you thought was a restaurant manager is actually a billionaire who secretly arranged for your art to be shown in a fancy gallery? That's the short version, yes. And you're upset about this, why exactly? Naya stared at her sister. Because he lied to me. Because our entire relationship was built on deception. Or, Rebecca said carefully, because he saw your talent and wanted to help you succeed. Whose side are you on? Yours. Always yours. But Naya, honey, you've been struggling for years to get your art noticed. Someone finally noticed it and gave you the opportunity you've been dreaming of, and you're angry about it. I'm angry about the lies. I'm angry that I can't trust anything about our relationship. I'm angry that I'll never know if my work is actually good enough or if people only care about it because of his connections. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you love him?
I thought I did.
But how can you love someone you don't really know? You know the important things, don't you? How he treats you, how he makes you feel, how he supports your dreams. He manipulated my dreams.
Did he?
Or did he use his resources to make your dreams possible? Naya felt fresh tears threatening. You don't understand. The art world is already so unfair, so based on connections and money instead of talent. I wanted to succeed on my own merit.
And maybe you would have, eventually.
But would you rather struggle for 10 more years trying to prove yourself, or accept that sometimes good things happen because someone who cares about you has the power to make them happen? You think I should forgive him? I think you should figure out what you're really angry about. Are you mad that he lied, or are you mad that he's rich?
Both, Naya admitted. The lying I get.
That's a valid thing to be upset about.
But being rich?
That's not exactly a character flaw. It changes everything between us. The power dynamic, Naya struggled to find words for what she was feeling.
The what?
The fact that he can afford to take care of you? The fact that you won't have to worry about rent or art supplies anymore.
I don't want to be taken care of.
I want to be an equal partner.
Says who?
Who decided that equal partnership means you both have to make the same amount of money? Rebecca's questions followed Naya through the next few days as she stayed in her sister's guest room, avoiding Ethan's calls and trying to figure out what she wanted. The exhibition had been extended for another week due to popular demand, and Patricia had been sending her updates about sales and media coverage. Her phone buzzed with another text from Ethan. I know you need space and I'm trying to respect that. But please know that I love you and I'm sorry for handling this so badly. Your art is extraordinary, and that has nothing to do with me. She'd received dozens of similar messages over the past 3 days, each one making her heart ache a little more. Because the truth was she missed him desperately. She missed their morning coffee talks, their walks through the city, the way he listened when she talked about her art. She missed falling asleep curled against his side and waking up to find him watching her with that soft expression that had always made her feel precious. But she also couldn't stop thinking about all the lies. How many times had he let her worry about money while knowing he could solve all her problems with a phone call? How many times had she apologized for not being able to afford nice restaurants or activities while he pretended to be in the same financial situation? On her 4th day in Portland, she was walking through a local art museum when she stopped in front of a painting that reminded her of her own work. It was a portrait of a working-class family, painted with the same attention to humanity and dignity that she tried to bring to her own subjects. She read the placard beside the painting and learned that the artist had been discovered by a wealthy patron who'd sponsored his first exhibition. The artist had gone on to have a successful career, and his work was now in museums around the world. Naya stood in front of that painting for a long time, thinking about Rebecca's questions and Ethan's messages and her own complicated feelings about success and independence and love. That evening she finally called him.
Naya.
His voice was rough, like he'd been sleeping or crying or both.
Hi. Are you okay?
Where are you? I'm in Portland, staying with my sister. Are you coming back?
I don't know yet. I need to ask you something.
Anything. The night we met, when I came into the restaurant, was that planned too? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. No, that was completely random. I just made this stupid bet with my friends about marrying the first woman who walked through the door, but when you came in, none of that mattered anymore.
A bet?
A drunk, heartbroken bet that I immediately forgot about because I was so taken with you. Everything that happened after that first night was real, Naya. My feelings for you, the time we spent together, the way you changed my life, all of that was real. But the lies were real too.
Yes.
And I'm sorrier about that than I can express.
Why didn't you tell me? Really tell me?
At first because I wanted you to get to know me without the complication of money. Then because I was scared you'd leave if you knew the truth. And then because I was in too deep and didn't know how to explain without losing you. You lost me anyway.
I know.
They were both quiet for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them.
Ethan? Yes. I miss you. I miss you too.
So much it feels like I can't breathe. But I don't know how to trust you again. I don't know how to get past the feeling that our entire relationship was built on lies.
I understand.
And I know I don't have the right to ask for another chance. But if you're willing to try, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that my love for you is the truest thing I've ever felt. Naya closed her eyes, tears flowing again.
I need more time. Take all the time you need. I'll be here.
After they hung up, Naya sat in her sister's garden, watching the sunset and thinking about choices and forgiveness and what it meant to build a life with someone. Tomorrow she would have to decide whether to go back to Seattle and try to rebuild what they'd had, or stay in Portland and start over completely. Either way, her life would never be the same. 2 weeks had passed since Nia left Seattle, and Ethan was barely functioning. He'd thrown himself into work with an intensity that worried even his most demanding board members, staying at the office until midnight and returning before dawn. Blake and Cameron had staged an intervention of sorts, showing up at his penthouse with takeout and concerned expressions. "This has to stop," Cameron said, looking around at the pristine apartment that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. "You're going to make yourself sick." "I'm fine," Ethan lied, though his reflection in the mirror that morning had shown a man who'd lost weight and gained dark circles under his eyes. "No, you're not," Blake said bluntly. "You're miserable, and you're making everyone around you miserable too. Jake said you snapped at a waiter yesterday for refilling your water glass." Ethan winced. He barely remembered the incident, but it sounded like something he might have done in his current state. "I apologized. That's not the point. The point is that you're falling apart, and sitting here feeling sorry for yourself isn't going to bring her back." "She doesn't want to come back," Ethan said quietly. "She's made that clear." "Has she? When's the last time you talked to her?" 4 days ago. She said she needed more time. "So give her time, but don't give up. Do something productive instead of wallowing." Cameron leaned forward. "What would make her happy? What would show her that your feelings are real?" Ethan thought about it. "Her art. She wants her work to succeed on its own merit, without any connection to me. So make that happen." "How?" Blake grinned. "I have an idea. But you're not going to like it." An hour later, Ethan found himself sitting across from Patricia at the gallery, discussing something he'd never imagined he would consider. "You want to what?" Patricia asked, looking confused. "I want to donate my entire art collection to be auctioned for charity, with the proceeds going to support emerging artists who can't afford professional representation or exhibition costs." That's incredibly generous, but I don't understand the connection to Nia. "I want her to be the curator for the auction. Her job would be to select the emerging artists who receive funding, to mentor them through their first professional exhibitions. It would give her credibility in the art world that has nothing to do with me personally." Patricia was quiet for a moment, processing the proposal. "Ethan, your collection is worth millions of dollars. Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything." "And you think this will convince her to forgive you?" "No," Ethan said honestly. "I think it will show her that I understand what I took away from her, and that I want to give her the chance to succeed on her own terms." That evening he called Nia. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice cautious. "Hi. Hi. How are you doing?" "I'm okay. Rebecca convinced me to set up a small studio in her garage. I've been painting again." "That's good. I'm glad you're creating. What about you? How are things?" "I've been thinking about what you said. About wanting to succeed on your own merit." Ethan dash. "I have a proposition for you. A job offer, actually. But I want you to hear me out before you say no." He explained his plan for the charity auction and the Emerging Artist Fund, carefully outlining how her role would be separate from their personal relationship. "You want me to curate an auction of your art collection? I want you to build something meaningful. Something that gives other artists the opportunities they deserve. Something that's entirely yours." Nia was quiet for a long time. "Why would you do this?" "Because I love you. And because I understand now that I can't love you properly if I don't respect what's important to you. This would be a huge career opportunity." "It would be. And whatever you decide about us personally, this offer stands. You're the right person for this job, and it has nothing to do with our relationship." "I need to think about it." "Of course. Take your time." After they hung up, Nia sat in Rebecca's garage studio, staring at a half-finished painting of the Portland skyline. The job Ethan had described would be everything she'd dreamed of, a chance to help other struggling artists, to build something meaningful in the art world, to establish her own reputation and credibility. But it would also mean going back to Seattle. Going back to a city full of memories of Ethan, to the life they'd started building together. "What are you thinking?" Rebecca asked, appearing in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "I'm thinking he's either the most manipulative man I've ever met or the most understanding." "Which do you think it is?" "I honestly don't know anymore." Rebecca handed her a cup and sat down on an old stool. "Can I tell you what I think?" "Sure." "I think he's a man who made some stupid mistakes but who genuinely loves you. And I think you're scared not because he lied to you, but because his world is so different from ours." "Maybe." "Nia, you've been painting sad, lonely cityscapes for 2 weeks. Every canvas in here looks like you're missing something. Naya looked around the studio, seeing her recent work with fresh eyes. Rebecca was right. Every painting carried a sense of longing, of something lost. I do miss him, she admitted. But I don't know how to get past the fact that he kept such a huge part of his life secret from me. So ask him to tell you everything. Really everything. And then decide if you can love all of who he is, not just the parts he showed you before. That night, Naya called Ethan back. I'll take the job, she said without preamble. Really? But I have conditions. Name them. First, this has to be completely professional. You can't interfere with my decisions or try to influence which artists I choose to support. Agreed. Second, I want complete transparency about your involvement. No more anonymous benefactor nonsense. If people ask how this fund was created, I want to be able to tell them the truth. Of course. And third, I want you to tell me everything. About your business, your wealth, your life before we met. I want to understand who you really are. I'll tell you anything you want to know. Okay. I'll be back in Seattle on Sunday. Naya? Yes. Thank you for giving me this chance. I'm not giving you a chance, Ethan. I'm giving myself one. The chance to build something I can be proud of, and the chance to figure out if I can love the real you as much as I love the person I thought you were. As she hung up, Naya felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. Not for them, necessarily, but for herself, for her future, for the possibility that sometimes the most complicated situations could lead to the most meaningful outcomes. In 3 days she would return to Seattle and start building something new. Whether that something included Ethan remained to be seen. Naya's hands shook as she stood outside the coffee shop where she'd arranged to meet Ethan. 3 months had passed since she'd returned to Seattle to start the Emerging Artist Fund. 3 months of working closely with him on the project while carefully maintaining professional boundaries. The fund had been an incredible success. They'd already supported 12 emerging artists with their first professional exhibitions, and Naya had gained recognition as a thoughtful curator and advocate for underrepresented voices in the art world. But today was different. Today was the final day of her original exhibition at the Meridian Gallery, the one that had started everything. Patricia had organized a closing reception, and Naya had finally worked up the courage to ask Ethan to attend with her. Not as her boss or her business partner, but as the man she was still trying to figure out how to love. You're early, Ethan's voice came from behind her. She turned to see him approaching, looking nervous and hopeful in equal measure. Over the past 3 months she'd learned so much about who he really was. He'd been true to his word about transparency, answering every question she'd asked about his business, his wealth, his past relationships. She'd even met his friends Blake and Cameron, who'd apologized for their role in his deception and who'd become surprisingly good friends to her as well. I wanted some time to think, she said, before we go in there. And what have you been thinking about? Naya looked at him, this man who had turned her world upside down in the most complicated way possible. I've been thinking about the night we met. About how scared I was walking into that restaurant in the storm. You were brave, Ethan said softly. Braver than I was, even though I was the one with everything to lose. Were you? Did you really have everything to lose? I thought I did. I thought if you knew who I really was, you'd see me the way everyone else did, as a bank account with a person attached. And now? Now I know that the only thing I really had to lose was you. They stood facing each other on the busy Seattle street, people walking around them, cars rushing past, the world continuing as if this wasn't the most important moment of Naya's life. I have something to tell you, she said. Okay. I got an offer yesterday. The Whitney Museum in New York. They want me to curate a major exhibition on contemporary American artists. It's everything I've ever dreamed of career-wise. Ethan's face went very still. That's incredible, Naya. You deserve that recognition. It would mean leaving Seattle. Leaving the fund we built together. The fund will be fine. Patricia can take over the day-to-day operations, and we've already established the selection criteria. This opportunity, you have to take it. Do I? Of course you do. It's the Whitney Museum. Naya studied his face, seeing the careful way he was controlling his expression, the way he was trying to be supportive even though she could see the pain in his eyes. What if I don't want to take it? Then you'd be crazy. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe I've been crazy for 3 months trying to figure out how to forgive you when the real problem was that I was scared. Scared of what? Scared of how much I love you. Scared of what it means to build a life with someone whose world is so different from mine. Scared that I'm not strong enough to be your equal partner. Naya. But I've realized something over these past 3 months working with you, seeing how you really operate in your world. You've never once treated me as anything less than your equal. Even when you were lying about who you were, you respected my opinions, my dreams, my independence. Because you are my equal. In every way that matters.
I know that now. And I know something else. What?
I know that I don't want the Whitney job. I want to stay here with you, building something meaningful together. I want to expand the fund, maybe start a foundation. I want to help more artists find their voices.
Are you sure?
Because I would never want you to give up an opportunity like that for me. I'm not giving it up for you. I'm choosing something different because it's what I really want. What we built together, it matters more to me than any prestigious museum position. I love you so much, he said, his voice breaking slightly. More than I ever thought it was possible to love someone.
I love you too. The real you. All of you.
Even the billionaire part? Especially the billionaire part, she said with a smile. Because it means you have the resources to help us change the art world for the better. So what happens now? Now we go into that gallery together as partners in every sense of the word. And after the reception, we go home to our apartment and figure out what comes next.
Our apartment?
Well, I assume you're tired of pretending to live in that tiny place in Capitol Hill.
I've seen your penthouse, Ethan.
The view is much better. He laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd heard from him in months.
Are you sure you're ready for that?
The penthouse, the lifestyle, all of it?
I'm ready for us.
Everything else we'll figure out together. As they walked into the gallery hand in hand, Naya felt a sense of completion she'd never experienced before. The walls were still lined with her paintings, but now she saw them differently. They weren't symbols of a success built on deception. They were proof that love, even complicated love, could create beautiful things. Look, Ethan said, stopping in front of her painting of the lonely man in the restaurant. Someone bought this one.
I know.
Patricia told me it sold on opening night. Do you want to know who bought it?
Who? Me.
It was the first one I purchased even before you knew I was involved.
Why?
Because when I looked at it, I saw myself. Who I was before I met you. And I wanted to remember that feeling so I'd never take what we have for granted. Naya felt tears welling up in her eyes. What are you going to do with it?
I was thinking we could hang it in our home.
As a reminder of how we found each other.
Our home.
Ethan dropped to one knee right there in the middle of the gallery, pulling a simple, elegant ring from his pocket. The other guests began to notice, conversations stopping as people realized what was happening. Naya Rivers, he said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes, I know I did everything backwards. I know I should have been honest from the beginning. But I also know that you are the love of my life, my creative partner, my equal in every way that matters. Will you marry me? Naya looked down at him, this brilliant, complicated, generous man who had changed her life in ways she was still discovering. She thought about the storm that had brought them together, about all the lies and misunderstandings and moments of doubt that had led them to this moment. Yes, she said loud enough for the entire gallery to hear. Yes, I'll marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, the gallery erupted in applause. Patricia was crying, Blake and Cameron were cheering, and strangers were taking photos of what would surely become a legendary story in Seattle's art community. I have one condition, Naya said when they broke apart. Anything. No more lies. No more secrets. If we're going to do this, we do it with complete honesty. Deal. Starting now.
Good.
Then I should probably tell you that I've been working on something in secret too. Ethan looked alarmed.
What?
Naya smiled mischievously. I've been planning a surprise exhibition. 20 emerging artists from around the country, all showing their work for the first time. I wanted to wait until after tonight to tell you, but since we're being completely honest. That's incredible.
When?
Next month. I was hoping my newly announced fiancé might want to attend the opening with me. I wouldn't miss it for the world. As they spent the rest of the evening celebrating with friends and strangers, accepting congratulations and fielding questions about their future plans, Naya reflected on how strange life could be. 6 months ago, she'd been a struggling artist with no prospects and no hope of breaking into the art world. Tonight, she was an engaged woman with a thriving career and a partner who believed in her dreams as much as she did. What are you thinking about? Ethan asked as they finally left the gallery, walking hand in hand through the Seattle streets. I'm thinking about that storm, she said. The night we met. I was so scared of everything, of being alone, of failing as an artist, of never finding someone who understood me. And now I know that sometimes the best things in life come from the storms we're brave enough to walk through. They stopped in front of their building, Not the small apartment they'd shared when he was pretending to be a restaurant manager, but the penthouse that would soon become their real home together. Ready to start our life together?
Ethan asked.
The real one this time? I've been ready since the night I walked into that restaurant, Naya said. I just didn't know it yet. As they rode the elevator up to their future, Naya thought about all the artists who would benefit from the foundation they were building together, all the dreams they would help make real, all the love stories that might begin because two people had been brave enough to trust each other with the truth. Outside, Seattle glittered in the darkness, full of possibility and promise. And inside the elevator, two people who had found each other in a storm held hands and planned the rest of their lives together.